the 100 Season 2 Episode 14, Bodyguard of Lies. I'm incredibly excited for the next episode because unfortunately I'm almost 2 weeks behind, so right after I do this, I get to see the first part of the season finale for this season. But this was a great episode leading up to what I can only imagine is going to be an amazing two-part season finale. We had, obviously the normal stuff with the war and things finally taking that big step to all-out war, which is going to be all of the season finale, which I can't wait to experience. But we finally got to see the big step towards the City of Light, and in an odd way it's like the giant step that we finally wanted to see, but at the same time it was still just another small step, because technically they made it to like the first section of the City of Light. There were the solar panels and stuff, and all the solar panels are intact, obviously because they're being used by someone. I don't know how they're doing it from so far away, because if the drone that flew out of the top of the solar panel is flying across the water, and it's not like they showed anything, you couldn't see it just from where they were, it has to be incredibly far out in the ocean. And I don't know how that really translates to them actually having any sort of power. And maybe they don't have power from that anymore. Maybe they used to use it when they were closer, and it's just the remnants, and it's like they figured out how to kind of travel with power or something. But I'm excited to see what happens. I don't know, really what to expect. I didn't expect them to have to go through like a minefield in this episode, so that was pretty interesting. It was crazy to watch that, because when they were initially kneeling down, when they were in the trailer and they were in that scene, I thought it was solely due to the sandstorm, and I guess in a way it really was. But it was just really interesting. It was fun to watch them have to deal with this, and it was a very small portion of the episode, but it was a lot of faith in this one. It's kind of been the big focus for Jaha ever since he decided to kind of go along with this storyline, and he's lost people in pretty much every big step. It's like when they got robbed, he lost a ton of people, and a lot of people had to decide, like, if we turn around now, we can get back to the camp. If we leave and follow the random words of the woman who lied to us and stole from us with her brother, we can keep going on. And then in this episode, they lost two people, because the guy, apparently if you tell crappy jokes, you get blown up. He dies, and then the woman who freaks out, unfortunately, just backs up into another mine, which I knew that was going to happen. It always seems to be the typical thing where it's like someone blows up, another person freaks out, and it's like even though they walk past the mines, when they try to go backwards, they always end up dying. So they lost two extra people in this episode. The third guy almost died. He like completely lost it, like, I can't do this. And fortunately he was saved, and Jaha didn't die either. And now they're just off in the water following this drone across the ocean in like a random boat. And I don't know what to really expect. I don't know, what this place is going to look like. For some odd reason, with it being called the City of Light, I had like this weird image of the Emerald City from The Wizard of Oz, except it wasn't emerald, it would just be clear glass, which made no sense whatsoever. But I don't really know what to expect on how it's going to look. I do still believe they have power, and maybe it is called the City of Light because they do actually have lights, and that's, it just happened to be they came across these solar panels, and that's not what they were talking about. It was like, it just seemed like that's what everyone was calling it. So I don't really know what to expect for that storyline. I do hope, of course, that we get a definitive answer, and if we do, it's definitely going to be held off until the very last episode, where Jaha, Murphy, and the other two are going to get to the City of Light, and it's going to be like this huge thing, and it's going to like boom, wait till season 3. But I'm excited for that. It's, with the war, I have a couple of expectations here and there, but with the City of Light, there's just so much, there's so many questions to it. And, so it kind of leads me to a really random thing, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned this, at some point. I had to have mentioned this before, but I always forget to talk about how the opening changes depending on where they are in the, basically in the map. So if it starts off at Mount Weather, that's where the opening title screen starts off, and in this episode it started off in the desert. And that's where the opening started off. It shows like the 100, but the background was actually the desert. And I always love that for each episode. It's a really tiny little thing, But it's something I've loved ever since I noticed it. Like, it even changes based on whether or not it's day or night, because they did it for Camp Jaha. That's how it normally started, was Camp Jaha. And then there was one episode that took place during the night. I believe it was the episode where, excuse me, where Finn died. It started off during that night, and, excuse me, the title started off with Camp Jaha during the night. So it was something I really noticed, because it was the first time one of the episodes actually started in the desert when they started to do that. Because I believe it did when Jaha landed on Earth, too. And it started there, but I don't think that was when they were actually changing every opening to match the first scene of the episode. So it was something I noticed, and I thought that was a really cool way to have the episode go, where it started off in the desert and it kind of ends in the water. So it was like, you know, polar opposites for their storyline as well, and just in this episode alone. So that was really cool. And then all the stuff with the war was definitely great in this episode. And, you know, they had that really big moment, and I knew it was going to happen. And it's like, someone's going to figure something out. Someone's going to know. They knew about the missile, and that's all there is to it. They're going to know. And in this episode, it was Octavia. And she, you know, she basically said exactly what I was thinking. Like, they're going to figure out, like, you two, like, we saw two people go into this one little area, and then they just got out, and they didn't come back for, like, 5 hours. It wasn't like, oh, they came out right when things got crazy because they survived or anything like that. They came back, like, 6 hours later. Yeah, nothing happened. You know, so, it makes it suspicious. So I loved Octavia confronting Clark about that, and, you know, Clark having to deal with Lexa because she was going to have Octavia killed off because she didn't trust her. It led to an interesting moment, especially between, obviously, Clark and Lexa, where they kind of established sort of a relationship, like an actual relationship, or at least the start of it. And I thought when they showed the preview, it was going to be simple, like Lexa would have feelings for Clark, and it wouldn't be reciprocated, but that's not what happened in this episode. When Lexa kissed Clark, Clark kissed her back. Like, that lasted much longer than, like, oh, she kissed me and, you know, I was kind of shocked, so I let it happen, and then I pushed her off. They made out for a little bit, and then she said, you know, I'm not ready to be with anyone, so, you know, they can end up together at some point if Lexa doesn't die off. I'm sure Clark won't, but Lexa could easily just, you know, vanish. So, you know, we'll have to see about that, but it was an actual, you know, moment that could possibly lead to a relationship, which I thought it was just like, you know, like I said, Lexa's gonna have feelings and Clark won't, and I was really wrong, and I was very surprised by that, with them, you know, possibly having this connection in the future. So, you know, I don't know how that's gonna play out with their characters and how that may or may not affect the stuff, everything after the war and this and that. I don't know how much the Grounders would really give a crap about, you know, especially considering rulers aren't determined by their lineage. It's all reincarnation based stuff, so it's kind of like, you know, I'm sure they wouldn't give a crap. But I thought that was really interesting. It surprised me that it was actually something serious and not just a moment that would kind of separate the characters. It actually brought them together a little bit more, and it showed, like with Clark kind of convincing Lexa to, you know, accept her emotions and show them. It did show a huge step for her character, because, you know, it's one thing if she'd done that with another Grounder, but she did that with, you know, the leader of the Sky People. So it shows like a huge step for Lexa as a character, actually displaying her emotions. And I'm sure she'll just hide it from everyone else, but at least for Clark, we'll get to see a little bit more than we've gotten, because we always have those moments when they're together, and we get a little bit of backstory on either, you know, the Grounders themselves or Lexa as a person. But that's, you know, it's a completely different dynamic now with her having, you know, done what she did. So I'm excited to see how that does play out for her character, whether it's relationship stuff or not, because it means that she'll at least open up more, and we'll get to learn more about her as well as her people, and, you know, more story about the universe of the show is always entertaining as far as I'm concerned. So that was a great little scene. It'll, you know, hopefully lead to more info about everything that we don't really know about yet within the world. And then we got to have this stuff with Bellamy inside of Mount Weather again, and I was really glad he survived, because I was a little freaked out. I'm like, I don't know if he's gonna, you know, make it when this thing explodes at the end of the episode. But it was cool he was able to stop everything and leading up to the actual war. And I was really glad that happened, because I was like, man, they're gonna lose a ton of people, and then the war's gonna be, you know, it's not gonna be what they thought it was gonna be. And that's, you know, especially with it being the 100, you can't really assume that it's gonna, you know, really work out too well. And fortunately, in this episode, it kind of went the more typical route, which in this case, perfectly fine, because that would have meant a ton of people would have died, you know, and they just got hit by a missile strike. Last thing they really need to deal with, you know, after something like that happens. So I was really glad to see everything worked out and Bellamy survived. We didn't really get to see any of the other characters after they'd been split up by basically the rest of the Resistance. But it was cool to see Bellamy work through. We got to see Raven and Wick, and it was cool to see Raven have like a big moment in this episode, because we haven't really seen her a lot. She's kind of just like, you know, hey, radio in and, you know, do this and do that, and then that's pretty much it for a scene. She tells everyone what to do, and then she was really trying to figure out, how do we stop the acid fog? She had to ask Wick to come in, and that really led to something I wasn't expecting. I didn't think they'd ever end up together. There was, you know, nothing really there. They knew each other on the Ark, and, you know, they're both like scientists and all that, but I was really surprised by what happened in this episode. And I didn't hate it or anything like that. It just really surprised me. And, you know, after they had sex, you know, that's when it really clicked to me, and it made me remember, like, the only person she'd ever been with was Finn. And, you know, with everything that went on with him, and then having just had sex with, like, you know, another person for the first time, I can only imagine how, you know, mentally, how much that would affect her. And she was almost in tears, but she kind of pulled it back together, because she obviously didn't want to deal with that at the moment. But it was, you know, an interesting scene that, like I said, it reminded me of some of the backstory for her character, and how she had only been with Finn, who, you know, unfortunately, like, cheated on her and all this extra stuff, and then he dies, and, you know, it's like the first time she's actually kind of dealt with that, I think, because we'd seen some of the scenes where obviously she really hated Clark, like, right after it happened, but they were able to work things out. And then aside from that, there wasn't much where we got to see Raven kind of deal with Finn's death. And I think in that really quick scene with her almost crying, it was like a lot of different scenes kind of just all rolled into one. Like, a lot of stuff that happened in the past, and obviously what had just happened, you know, in the present. It was just really interesting to see that, and I'm sure it'll work out well for the characters. I don't think it'll be like just devastating for her all the time, but it was a great little scene, and I wasn't expecting either of them. I wasn't expecting them to get together, or the scene that came after that where she mentally kind of had to pause and kind of assess everything that just happened, and kind of combine that with everything that she dealt with pretty much her entire life as far as relationships and things like that. So I did enjoy it. It was a nice development for a character. It sucked that it was, you know, sort of good, and then it ended, and it was sort of difficult for her to deal with in the moment. But I'm sure it'll, you know, hopefully work itself out, because it's the 100, so you never know. But I do hope it works itself out, because honestly, I think she deserves it after all the crap she's been through with the stuff with her leg, obviously all the Finn stuff, and then still obviously caring about him, and then he dies, and, you know, now she can't really go out, and, you know, that kind of ties into the whole leg stuff. So I think she deserves to have, like, just a good storyline, and this is just like the start of it, and it was the first taste of, like, it's good, but it made her realize some of the crappy things. So hoping that works out. And then obviously the stuff with the war, I'm excited to see it. So, you know, I can't wait to get to this first part of the season finale, and, you know, I don't know what to expect. Like, the City of Light, I do have to assume we're going to get that. And I don't know who's going to live and who's going to die inside the bunker, who's going to live and who's going to die outside the bunker. Like, not everyone's going to make it in this show. It could be some random people. It could be some main characters. I obviously hope no main characters outside of Dante's son and, like, the lieutenants and all that, because they're the bad guys right now. But I'm really excited for it. I love this episode. And, of course, I want to know what you guys thought. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And even though I'm a week behind, I do have to ask, you know, what do you guys think is going to happen with the war? And also, what do you guys think about sort of the relationship things that we got in this episode? The stuff between both Lex and Clark, as well as Raven and Wick, because those are two really big things. Like, even though it's a bit more important when you have, like, the two commanders in a relationship compared to, like, two scientists, it's still a big deal because they're all main characters. So I want to know what you guys think. So please comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.